It's taken time, and I appreciate the perception that we didn't always get the balance exactly right. But I still believe that the vision is the right one. CAP disproportionately rewarded the largest landowners and held back smaller farmers. It did little for food productivity or the environment. It was far, far too bureaucratic. Just remember, we used to argue about whether a cauliflower and a cabbage were the same crop, and you could be fined thousands for a gateway being too wide or a buffer strip too narrow. So it's right that our new system invests in the foundations of food security, and we are moving in the right direction. Nearly half of all farmers are now in one of our schemes that were designed with you. And they have something for every type of farmer, from uplands to lowlands, arable to livestock, and of course, tenants. Unlike the Labour Party, we will never introduce mandatory requirements to put a percentage of your land into schemes. Nor will we introduce broad-ranging blanket rules like top-down 20-mile-an-hour mandates. With us, you'll have more choice, not less. And today, we want to go further to support you. So we're announcing new steps to make our schemes more generous and easier to use. Take the managing payment. It's working, with many farmers, small farmers especially, signing up. So I can announce today that we're going to double that payment to £2,000, with thousands of farmers receiving that money this spring. We're also launching the biggest ever package of grants this year to boost productivity and resilience, which will total £220 million, increasing the Improving Farming Productivity Scheme to invest in things like robotics and barn-top solar. We're opening a new round of the Farming Equipment and Technology Fund too, worth £70 million. Second, as farming changes, how we work with you in government must change too. The services we provide must be shaped around your needs. And we've got to build a culture that's based on trust. As President Eisenhower said, you know, farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from a cornfield. So we're changing the culture. That means trust, support, cooperation. It means delivering on our promise to cut planning red tape that's stopping you from diversifying. In April, for instance, we'll lay legislation so you can create bigger farm shops or outdoor sports venues. And it means more funding for grassroots mental health support, because we know what a tough job farming is. Thirdly, we're strengthening support for your primary role, to produce the nation's food. Food security is a vital part of our national security. And recent years have brought home the truth of that. Putin set off not just an energy price bomb, but a food price bomb too. And as Minette has so powerfully reminded us time after time, in an age of climate change and instability, global food production will become increasingly volatile. So it's important to strengthen food security here at home. Our Agriculture Act introduced a 3-yearly report to monitor food security. But given how much has happened in the last 3 years, it's clear that we need to go further. So today I can announce that we'll step up our monitoring with a new annual food security index, which we expect to be UK-wide. And yes, Minette will make this statutory when parliamentary time allows. We'll publish the first draft at the Farm to Fork Summit this spring. And I'm also delighted to say that those summits will become an annual event. And one way to improve food security is to stop millions of tons of good, fresh farm food from going to waste, just because of its shape or size. So we'll also provide funding today, £15 million, to redirect that surplus into the hands of those who need it. So in conclusion, supporting farmers, changing our approach, and strengthening food security. That's our plan. And you can trust us to deliver because we already are. You said you wanted a fair price for your products. Tomorrow, we're laying new regulations for the dairy sector, and we're launching a review of the poultry sector. You asked for fair treatment in our trade deals, so we're standing up for farmers in those negotiations, whether it's with Canada or anybody else. You asked for a fairer, more supportive regulatory system, and we've reformed our approach, cutting penalties for minor issues already down by 40%. But more than this, you can trust us because I know how important my neighbours, our farmers, all of you truly are. You help support millions of jobs, add billions to our economy, shape the landscape, but most of all, you produce the food we need. Food that is some of the best and highest quality anywhere in the world. And that's why I say to all of you and to Britain's farmers, just as I did in my very first speech in Parliament, I've got your back. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, thank you. I've sat at this table with, as I mentioned, 6 different Secretaries of State, and it really is a huge privilege to have you as Prime Minister with us today. We've got a couple of questions, and I'll ask people to come to the microphones in a minute, but I just wanted to start by touching on the situation with the core standards, effectively, for how we set our negotiations with these trade deals. I know how difficult Canada has proved, and we've been on that journey for 3 years now, and then it was really appreciated that you did stand by your commitment and you did walk away. But I think a lot of the frustration in this room is driven by the fact that we have, on top of SPS, we have high standards of environmental protection and animal welfare legislation. And we've been asking for a long time, when can the core standards become part of our trade negotiations? I'd be very interested to know your thoughts on that, really.
Yeah. Well, first thing to say is we do have some of the highest quality standards of production welfare anywhere in the world. It's part of what makes our produce, what all of you do, so highly valued. And yes, we'll talk a little bit about the inward side of the trade deals, but it's why we're able to open up new markets, because people desperately want what we produce in this country. And we think we've done that successfully, whether it's putting our lamb back on supermarket shelves in the US, CPTPP, other deals, which is very positive. But you're right, we need to make sure that our farmers aren't undercut. That's why we have the Independent Trade and Agricultural Commission, something we've spoken about in the past, that can provide that advice from government, and they've been clear that we do not need to change any of our statutory protections at the moment for any of our standards as a result of the deals that we've struck. And one thing that I want to make sure we do going forward is improve our focus on labelling. It's making sure that our shoppers, when they're out and about in their supermarkets, know exactly what they are buying, what standards it's produced to, where there are differences. That should be clear and transparent, because what we can't have is some products masquerading as something else, and that's not fair. And I remember this very acutely when I first became an MP, and it was the sow stall ban. One of my neighbours, who's a pig farmer, was walking me through that. And again, this is dating back, right? It was a European-wide piece of welfare legislation, well-intentioned, but again, we implemented it before anyone else did, and then suddenly you could be buying pork pies in the supermarket that were produced to a different standard no one would ever know. And it's making sure that things like that in the future we can deal with and make sure things are clearly labelled so that all of you are recognised and our shoppers can buy with confidence high-quality British food.
Steve Barclay knows all too well my criticism on the labelling, which is 50% of the value of the food market is out of home. Our pubs, hotels, bars, restaurants. So will it be a manifesto commitment for the Conservative Party? Because the Trade Agricultural Commission, of course, it took 1 million people to get that over the line, and they have recommended it.
Yes, no, I'm not going to write our manifesto here and now, but I think hopefully you can see our track record on these things. And actually, it's funny, actually, when I first came to Parliament and I was on the EFRA Select Committee,
one of the things then we were trying to fix on labelling was country of origin labelling. And, you know, again, it's this fact of processed food. We had done it for fresh produce, but not for processed produce. So where did that pork come from inside the pork pie? Still called a British pork pie if it was just, you know, put together here, but ultimately the meat was from somewhere else, as I said, produced to a different standard. So look, we've got a track record of fixing these things. I think labelling is important, standards are important. You've seen the approach we've taken with the tax, so, you know, I'll say, you know, wait to see what's in the manifesto. But look, we are absolutely committed to supporting you to produce a high quality and making sure that you are not undercut when you are doing that, because that's just not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that we'll be picking that up with all parties, because it's absolutely critical to have in a manifesto. I'm going to ask Hannah Beisman if she can come as our Hertfordshire farmer, if she can come to the microphone. And while Hannah is coming to the microphone, I'm just going to focus on my second question to you, which, you know, I noticed when you were talking, and it was really, really great to hear you say that you want to see food security as part of our critical national infrastructure. And, you know, that point at the Resilience Forum, whereby, you know, you were very much talking about the challenges of building resilience, the importance of investing in our energy security, but food security was rather referenced to the global south. Do you see a real sea change now that actually we have to address this? We've got a maritime climate. Food security must be a top priority for government?
I mean, in a word, yes. Now, I think we focus sometimes on the headline number, you know, 75% self-sufficient in the foods that we can actually produce here, but we need to improve that. That's something I think we all want to see. It's what the British public want to see, and the events of the last couple of years have demonstrated how important that is. And what that headline number, whilst it looks, you know, respectable, underneath that are categories where there's very surprising, you know, lack of sufficiency in areas. You know, Mark would give you chapter and verse on this, but things like tomatoes, you know, where 16% self-sufficiency is quite counterintuitive. Pears, plums would be similar. Things like lettuces, apples, raspberries, only at 40%. Again, that's very surprising when you think about what we're capable of here. So look, there's clearly things that we can do. That's why you and I talked about this. We focused on it. We had the Farm to Fork Summit in Downing Street last year. First ever time that's happened, delivered on that commitment. Pleased to say that will now be an annual event to shine a spotlight on this. And what I just announced earlier is that we're going to, you know, move towards what you've asked us, and that's to have a food security index that's published annually. And will be done on a UK-wide basis, and when parliamentary time allows, we'll put that on a statutory footing, and that will give us exactly the transparency and spotlight that we need on this issue, combined with all the policy that we're doing, supporting you to increase food production through the schemes, that will get us to the outcome that we want, more British food produced here at home, because that's what the public wants, and that's what the country needs.
Lovely, thank you. Hannah, please.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Prime Minister. The EU remains UK farming's market, yet the cost remains ahead on the UK agri-food. What plans does the UK have to firstly break down these barriers, particularly for SBS, and secondly, manage regulatory to enable the sector to fulfill its potential? Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah. So what we're doing is working very hard with individual countries, all their differences, or there needs to be. I'll be totally honest, it's a work in. We are making progress. Examples rolled over the EU-New Zealand SPS deal, so that's been quite helpful in the situations that you're asking about. Specific Sweden, we did
How are you, Prime Minister, going to ensure that the outcomes from these investment policy will ensure farmers can secure a sustainable and resilient future, giving us the security that we deserve?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to say, Claire, is that all of you work incredibly hard. Right? I see that firsthand at home in North Yorkshire, and the least we can do is make sure that you are paid fairly for that incredible work that you do. And that's why, you know, whether it was a grocery code adjudicator some time ago, or the more recent supply chain reviews that the Secretary of State and the ministers have initiated, we're determined to have a supply chain that is fair, where there is fairness, where there is transparency. This is a plan that we set out, that we are sticking to, that is delivering for you. Tomorrow we'll be laying the regulations in dairy sector, and then we're moving on to pigs and poultry and egg in the coming period, and also starting to look at fresh produce. So that was our commitment to you, that we would do these reviews, we would make sure that we figure out what's going on, and we're laying the regulations to ensure that we do have that fairness and transparency, because that, as I said, is what you deserve. It's what we need to have if we believe in a sustainable future for farming, which we all want to see, and we're delivering on the commitments that we made. And as I said, you'll see that tomorrow, and more to come after that. We're going through the sector systematically. Fairness is at the heart of it. And I'll just touch on the last thing that you said, Claire, about, I think, mental health, and Minette talked about it in her speech as well, very powerfully. Again, you know, we all recognise the challenges when you're in a small business, a family business, which is by its nature volatile. That is stressful. I grew up in a small family business. My mum was a pharmacist, and you know, that was our family business, and that didn't have the volatility that all of your businesses have, and it was stressful enough. So I can only imagine what that feels like. And that's why one of the announcements we've made today is providing a little bit of extra financial support to organisations that are supporting you and your colleagues when they run into some difficulty and want some mental health support, because I think that is important, and it's something that we probably didn't talk about enough in the past, that actually when I'm out and about now, people are more open about, and I'm delighted that we can do that today.
Can I just say how welcome those investigations are? I mean, you heard my challenge on behalf of this audience to UK food retailers. You know, it really is an untenable marketplace out there. The continuing retail price war, the fact that members come to me for fear of being delisted, they don't feel they can speak up, you know, the culture really has to change. They want to sell more British food, consumers want to buy it. We have to make this work now. So those investigations are really welcome. I'm getting all sorts of various sign language from me, which I'm not quite sure whether that means one more question, one more second. One more question? I think that's one more question. Or we'll take it as one more question anyway. I've got a whole list of probably about 30 questions that have not been able to be put to you today. So hopefully we can put those to the DEFRA team or to number 10. I hope. There's nods.
They're all nodding down there. That's fine.
Look, you saw in the video, we've seen huge areas of the country underwater. Yeah. I think, you know, one of the big challenges of stepping back from BPS was there was a payment for land, effectively. It was bad enough when we were storing water then, but now when farmers are being asked to store water to protect houses and businesses for no compensation, it's a situation that has clearly got to change. And, you know, I wonder if you are focusing on reviewing the flood defence grant to ensure that rural areas are not left behind, and offered by farmland. And I would also add to this, and many members who have been very reliant on extraction for irrigating crops, you know, the fact that we're wasting diffuse water into the sea. We need to be able to have more on-farm reservoirs to store water, move water. Are we going to have a different approach to water?
Look, there'll be many people in this room who suffered what you saw on the video, and it was devastating. Yeah. And it's always devastating when that happens. And I'll just take a minute to say thank you to Robbie, who many of you know, who was, hopefully, you saw very active in responding to your concerns and working with farmers in the affected areas to quickly get in place the support. And we do have the support in place. The flood recovery framework which has payments of up to £25,000 for land that has been particularly affected, is there and I think is working. We're always open to suggestions on how we can tweak things for the future, so please feed them into the team and we'll have a look at them, because the impact of this is significant. I mean, we talked about the volatility of business day to day. When you've got this on top of it, it is awful to grapple with, which is why we want to make sure the support is there. Now, in terms of flood defences, when I was Chancellor, we, I think, almost doubled our flood defence budget to £5.2 billion. And I come from a rural area, I represent a rural area. About, from memory, just under half of that money goes to rural areas. So, don't feel that that money is all going to urban areas. It's not. It's something between 40 and 45% is going to rural areas of that very significant flood defence budget. And then the last thing I'd say is just actually, I mentioned it earlier, but you might not have caught it. Again, we made an announcement today of some extra funding going to internal drainage boards, because making them resilient and have the resources that they need in place, flood protection, is really important. It's something that gets raised with me and Robbie and the team on quite a regular basis. So one of the things that we've announced today that the team can elaborate on later is extra support for internal drainage boards, because, I mean, you watch the video, you talk to all of you, and you'll have experienced it firsthand, where we can make a difference to stop these things from happening, support people when they do happen. Of course we want to do that, and that's what I believe we are doing.
Can I just say that pilot whereby you are putting money into the IDBs, that is absolutely critical, whether you are in Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, Norfolk. I've been around the country recently and seen huge areas. I know, Robbie, you've been out, and Secretary of State has as well. I mean, it is a broken system, and we are storing water on farmland with no compensation for the farmer. I think a lot depends on getting this pilot right, and a lot of that goes back to, are we valuing our land for sustainable food production or not? So it's sort of a real reset, and with the agencies, dare I say it. Alan Lovell is going to be here this afternoon, and I know this audience will be very, very lively in their questioning of the chairman of the Environment Agency. So perhaps making sure that they are fit for purpose outside. Now we've left the European Union, we need agencies that are fit for purpose as well.
No, well, I'm sure you have a good session with her, and I know we're out of time. So I was just going to say thank you very much for having me. And I think I'd say to all of you, and you'll hear from the team later, but I meant every word of what I said to you earlier, right? I go home when I do get to go home, which is not as much as I'd like, to an area filled with all of your colleagues, right? My neighbour is a dairy farmer. That is the world around me. Those are my neighbours. I understand firsthand what it is all of you go through, and so does the ministerial team, right? We are a group of people who deeply value and appreciate what you do for our country. Minette talked about it at the end of her speech. I talked about it. It is an incredible thing you do, right? You don't do it for the money, for sure, right? You do it because you love it. You do it because you feel a responsibility. You do it because it's tradition, and I'm enormously grateful to you for it. I think it's a very special part of our country, and hopefully, as you'll see when you hear a little bit more about the announcements today, you can see that we're delivering on the plan that we set out. We're getting the financial support to you. We've changed our approach to trade deals to support you, and we're making sure that there's fairness in the supply chain, because that's what you deserve. And we've got a massive new and welcome focus on food security, on food production. That is a collective aim of everyone in this room. More fantastic British food on our shelves, produced by all of you, and a long-term resilient farming sector. So that's what we're going to set out to deliver, and it's been a real pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, you come out with me.
We're going to go that way.
Right, perfect. Right, come on.